Welcome, wanderer. You've stepped into a place where sanity is optional and the walls whisper back. Don't mind the shadows. They only stare if you stare first. Here, screams sound like laughter, and the laughter never really stops. Sit down, stay a while. After all, it's not like you're leaving anytime soon. And by the way, please do subscribe while you're still breathing.
Caroline was a nurse that everything a patient could want. Gentle voice, reassuring smile, and hands so light you barely felt the needle slip into your vein. But behind her soft demeanor, something had unraveled long ago. It started at St. Augustine's Care Home, a quiet, half-forgotten facility tucked into the outskirts of town. The kind of place where patients outnumbered visitors 10 to 1. Caroline worked the night shift. Fewer people. Fewer questions. Her co-workers saw her as devoted. The kind who stayed late to comfort the dying, who volunteered for the most difficult cases. But behind closed doors, her compassion morphed into something grotesque. To Caroline, pain was intimate. Watching the flicker of life fade from a patient's eyes wasn't tragic. It was beautiful. It was control. A pure moment when she alone decided the end. She kept a little black notebook in her locker. Each page was a name, a date, a method. Some were slow, a whispered reduction in oxygen flow. Others quick. The injection of a compound she'd concocted herself, undetectable, untraceable. She called it her mercy list. One day, a new resident arrived, Mr. Alan Reed, a retired psychiatrist with early stages of dementia. But Alan had been sharp once, and something about Caroline put him on edge. Her questions were too personal. Her visits too frequent. One night, he stared at her and murmured, "You're not here to heal. Are you?" Caroline smiled gently. "I'm here to help you rest." Alan started to write things down based on what he noticed about Caroline. He told his daughter during her weekly visit. Slipping her a note, "Watch the nurse at night. The one who always smells like lavender." The next day, he was gone. Heart failure, they said. Caroline crossed his name off the list. She didn't know about the note that Alan gave to his daughter. But 2 weeks later, 2 detectives came. With calm voices. They claimed it's just a routine questioning. They were looking into patterns. Odd similarities. Suspicious timing. Caroline smiled. "Let them investigate," she murmured. "I have a new list now." Caroline Mays grew up in silence. Her father, a former Marine, believed in order, discipline, and punishment. Her mother, frail and hollow-eyed, floated through life like a ghost, a bottle of codeine always nearby. Caroline learned early that pain was currency. Crying brought more of it. Stillness was safer. By 12, she'd mastered control. Her dolls became her patients. She'd bandage them, inject them, even stage surgeries in the basement with her mother's sewing kit. Her father praised her for being unemotional. That was his word. Not brave. Not strong. Unemotional. At 17, she found her mother slumped in the bathtub, wrists open like broken mouths. She stared at the blood and felt nothing. Only the faintest flicker of fascination. She watched it swirl down the drain before calling 911. Years later, Caroline walked the halls of St. Augustine's with precision and poise. Patients trusted her. Families thanked her. Administrators called her an angel. That phrase stayed with her. It lit something dark inside. Not pride, but purpose. Her first mercy was unintentional. Mrs. Halvorsen, a terminal cancer patient, had begged for more morphine. Caroline hesitated, then gave her double. She passed quietly in her sleep. The reaction was validation. The family wept with relief, thanked Caroline for her compassion. From then on, she sought that moment again. The crossing from life to death, gentle and controlled. She perfected it. No pain, no mess, just rest. She started keeping records. Her notebook wasn't for guilt. It was a catalogue of kindness. Names, doses, timelines, how peaceful each one had been. She convinced herself she was ending suffering. But something else was happening. She began to choose patients who weren't dying, just difficult, loud, uncooperative, paranoid. The line between mercy and convenience blurred. Her voice stayed sweet, her hands stayed steady, but inside, something had fractured completely. Then came Alan Reed, the retired psychiatrist. He saw her, truly saw her, and that made him dangerous. Alan Reed's death was filed quickly, heart failure, as expected for a man in his condition. Caroline stood by his bedside as the code was called and futile chest compressions were performed. Her expression was a perfect mask of concern. Inside, she was calm. She had measured every dose. Left no trace. Just as always. But what she didn't know was that Alan had left behind a note. Handwritten, tucked beneath the tissue box on the nightstand, passed quietly to his daughter, Lila, during her final visit. The nurse smells like lavender. She asks questions she shouldn't. Watch the way she watches people. She's not here to heal. Lila didn't know what to make of it. Dementia, perhaps. Or paranoia. But it stayed with her. She began to do her own investigation, searching through patient records, staff complaints, and obituaries. The numbers didn't add up. Too many deaths. All overnight. All during Caroline's shifts. Lila took the information to the state ombudsman, who in turn contacted law enforcement. Quietly, carefully. The administrators at St. Augustine's weren't informed. Not yet. That would come later. 2 detectives arrived under the guise of routine protocol reviews. One was young and friendly, the other older and quiet. Watching more than talking, Caroline greeted them with ease, her smile as polished as ever. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all," said the older detective. "Just reviewing procedures for facilities like yours. Care protocols, end-of-life documentation. Just usual routine stuff." Caroline knew how to lie. Knew when to be helpful and when to play ignorant. But when she went home that night, she sat in her apartment. Cold, sterile, perfectly organized, and stared at her notebook. Mercy list number 17. Alan Reed, 1:45 a.m. Slow fade. Peaceful. Eyes open till the end. Knew too much. She flipped back through the pages. Names. Times. Smiles. Moments of compassion. They weren't confessions to her. They were artifacts. Evidence of control. A chronicle of endings done right. And yet, for the first time, something dug into her calm. The thought of losing control. She didn't panic. Not yet. But she started planning. She revised her schedule. Moved her locker contents. Burned the original notebook in a metal bin on her balcony, watching the pages curl into ash. But still, someone knew. She could feel it. A shift in how the nurses spoke to her. A lingering glance from the security guard. An administrator who forgot her name, after years of calling her our star. And worse, she kept seeing Alan, in the hallway. In the reflection of the glass medicine cabinet. In the empty beds. "You're not here to heal," he whispered. "You don't get to haunt me," she snapped. But he did, and he would. The calls started on a Wednesday. No voice. Just breathing. At first, Caroline thought it was a mistake. But then came the second and third. Always between 1:30 and 2 a.m., the exact hour she had administered Alan Reed's final injection. She stopped sleeping. Not out of fear, she told herself, but vigilance. She watched the hallway cameras. She double-checked her patient charts. She even scrubbed her locker clean with bleach until her hands were red and stinging. But things began to slip. A syringe tray was found misplaced. An order sheet mysteriously altered. One of her patients, alive and lucid, insisted she had whispered something in his ear that night. Something about rest. Something about letting go. She told me I'd be better off gone, he told a nurse. Caroline denied it. She smiled. She comforted. But inside, her world was cracking. Worse still was Alan. He didn't go away. He started appearing in reflections. Sometimes behind her in the medication room mirror, other times in the windows of patient rooms. He never moved, never blinked. Just stood there, face twisted in something between sadness and satisfaction. "You're sloppy now," he whispered once, as she passed an empty bed. "You're getting caught." She told herself it was stress, lack of sleep, the calls, the pressure. But she also knew the truth. She was losing the edge. And the detectives were returning. This time, they weren't smiling. They asked specific questions. About dosing. About death rates. About patterns. They had charts. Graphs. A timeline. She deflected. Redirected. She even cried just a little. Just enough to appear overwhelmed but not unstable. But the older detective watched her like Alan had. Not for the words but for the tells. The moments between. The flickers behind her eyes. After they left, she went to the staff bathroom and vomited. That night, she dreamed she was lying in a hospital bed. Strapped down. Alan standing over her with a syringe. "Time to rest," he said. "It's peaceful. You'll see." She woke up gasping. But her sheets were wet. Not with sweat, but with something dark and sticky. It was blood. But it was gone in a blink of an eye. Just a dream, wasn't it? She asked herself. Caroline stopped charting properly. Medication doses became inconsistent. Patients complained of dizziness, hallucinations. One woman screamed when Caroline entered the room, saying, "You're the one who killed the man with the broken mind." Caroline smiled at her. But it wasn't the real smile. It's the sterile one. The fake smile she practiced. This was too wide. Too much gum and teeth clamped tight behind it like a secret she could no longer hold in. The nurses noticed. They whispered. The head nurse called her in for a meeting. Caroline nodded politely, took the reprimand in stride, then went straight to the medication room and stared at the locked cabinet. She imagined unlocking it. Filling every syringe. Silencing the whole ward. Finally, peace. But not yet. She still had to clean her record. That night, she broke into the administrator's office. Not like a criminal, but like a nurse. Confident and composed. She copied files. Erased 2 notes. Shredded an old incident report about a concern raised years ago. One that suggested she had been too eager with painkillers. She stuffed the pieces in her purse and flushed them, slowly, piece by piece, in the patient restroom on the 2nd floor. But it was too late. The detectives had a warrant. And someone had talked. It was Lila, Alan's daughter. She had secretly recorded her last 2 conversations with Caroline. In one, Caroline asked whether her father had passed peacefully. In the other, she whispered, "Sometimes, people don't know when it's their time. We have to help them understand." It was enough. The detectives came at dawn. They found her standing in room 213, whispering to an empty bed, smiling at nothing. She didn't run. She turned to them and said softly, "I did good things. I helped people rest. I took their pain. I took it into me." She opened her arms like she expected an embrace. Instead, they placed her in handcuffs. As she was escorted out of St. Augustine's, Caroline looked back at the hallway. For a moment, in the flickering fluorescent light, she saw all the faces. Alan, Mrs. Halvorsen, and the rest. Lined up, silent, watching her go. Some smiled. Some did not. Caroline never stood trial. The court psychiatrist deemed her unfit to stand, citing a complex case of paranoid delusional disorder layered with clinical narcissism and dissociative psychosis. In layman's terms, she believed her mercy killings were acts of healing. And she didn't know right from wrong anymore. The public reaction was split. Some called her a monster, a cold-blooded killer hiding behind a uniform of care. Others disturbingly called her a tragic figure, even a victim of an uncaring system that let patients suffer and nurses carry too much. But no one truly knew what happened in her mind. Only Caroline did, and even she wasn't sure anymore. She was committed to Eastmoor Psychiatric Hospital, a high-security mental institution built like a cross between a hospital and a prison. The white walls reminded her of St. Augustine's too much. At night, the whispers came back. She would sit upright in her bed and speak to them. Not fearfully, but gently. Like patients. Like friends. "You're safe now," she would murmur. "No more pain. I'm still your nurse." The staff documented her behavior. She smiled constantly, answered questions that hadn't been asked, lined up her food into pill-like formations before eating. She refused therapy but offered her own diagnoses to the other patients. "He hears voices, but they're the wrong kind. You have to listen to the quiet ones." No one visited her except once. It was Lila. She stood outside the glass, watching Caroline sit cross-legged on the floor, humming to herself. Caroline looked up and smiled. A real smile this time. Not wide. Not sinister. Just soft. "I helped him," she murmured. "He saw me," she said. But Lila didn't reply and she just walked away. Years passed. Caroline remained at Eastmoor. Never improved. Never deteriorated. Just existed. But one morning, a nurse found a drawing in her room. Charcoal on paper. Crude, but detailed. A hospital hallway, rows of beds, all the patients were smiling, and at the far end of the hallway stood Caroline. Hands outstretched as a line of new patients walked toward her, one by one, each with their eyes closed, and behind them, faint but clear, was a sign above the hallway door, "Rest Ward. Authorized personnel only." Underneath, written in childlike scrawl, "Everyone deserves peace. Some of us just need a little help getting there."
So, have you enjoyed the story? And have you subscribed? Subscribe now. Go on, press it. Don't make me laugh. You think you can watch and just walk away? No, no, no. Around here, that button isn't a choice. It's survival. If you don't subscribe, I'll still find you. In the silence of your room. In the twitch of your lights. In that moment when you swear you're alone. Click it before I click you.